Welcome to the next episode of Brandland. I'm your host, Garrett Justice, and today I am joined by Daniel Kelly, who is the Director of Marketing at Sierra Nevada University. Daniel, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. Thanks, Garrett.
Thank you so much for joining us on our episode today. I'm really excited to jump into our topic, about some of the impacts of COVID-19 and translating in-person experiences to those virtual experiences, which I know you've had a lot of experience with recently. So
forced experience.
Yeah, that's right. As many of us have, right? So before we do that though, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit more about your background and more about Sierra Nevada University?
Sure. I've got a really kind of a long background, but I think I'll see if I can give you the trajectory here. I kind of began in the early 2000s as a coffee roasting rock and roll coffee shop owner. I built a little Midwestern fair trade coffee brand.
Awesome.
And booked a lot of rock and roll shops in a coffee shop called The Mission in central Wisconsin. Shout out to Stevens Point there. And after that, things kind of changed, and I went on to get my MFA in film, video, and new genres at UW-Milwaukee. And I stepped off of there with a early career Fulbright. I went and taught video production and audio in India and helped a student volunteer team build their own streaming media station. And that was really a great experience and kind of set the stage for a lot of things I do now.
Cool.
After that, I did some teaching at UW and then decided to move back out to California, where I was born and raised. And I found a job here at Sierra Nevada University teaching photography and video production. And then through some twists of fate, I did some social media content and search work for Master in Fine Arts program here in interdisciplinary arts. And that worked out really well. And then the director of marketing position opened up and I stepped up for that. And so 3 years later, here I am doing that job. And I'm kind of applying the last 20 years of production and
awesome
team leading to what I do here for this institution that I really love.
Yeah, I love that. I don't know if we made the connection yet of I was born in Southern California and I lived in the Midwest too, in Minneapolis for a little while. So we have that connection going for us there.
Yeah, it took me 18 years to be able to afford to get back to California.
That's right. That's why I'm in Salt Lake City now. a little different. Yeah. Well, tell me a little bit more. I'm curious before we dive into our topic. Tell me about that transition from, teaching into then this director of marketing role. What are your biggest learnings, or, what's that transition like?
Well, I've translated a lot of the teaching to the work that I do here because we run a student marketing team, right? And we really give them kind of like a pipeline to content work. Really, that's like, it's only about 2 years old now that we've been paying those students and making them work as a team and attend meetings and follow and reach goals. And I'm really proud of it. I see, just like the radio station that we did in India, I see the students that have like graduated from the pipeline going out and getting work in the field or getting work sideways in the field. So that's been really great.
I think that's an awesome idea. Like what a better way for, a student to get real world experience before they go out and do it. So, kudos to you and the team there for coming up with that idea. I think it's awesome.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit more about Sierra Nevada University too, because I know you went through a rebrand a couple of years ago. Tell me a little bit more about the size of the university, right?
Yeah. Well, we did the rebrand this year. We started.
Oh, was it this year? Okay.
And we started in January.
Wow.
With redesigns and stuff like that. But, SNU's a small private university. We're right on the north shore of Lake Tahoe.
Pretty place to be.
Yeah, it's pretty fantastic. And our faculty are all like accomplished professionals in their area that they teach, so they bring that to it. And we really believe that entrepreneurship is a way of life, so it doesn't really matter if you're an artist or a writer or somebody who's interested in business. We all kind of work on this entrepreneurial thinking as a way to live, right? So that student team and pipeline to the workplace is it's not just my idea. It's really what we all do here
Cool.
at this school, right? So my department, like I said earlier, runs a team of content creators and curators that we recruit from student body, hopefully as freshmen, so that we can keep them longer, right? And then what else am I missing? It really was based on the idea that they put out our message in student voices, right? Because that's the way you talk to pivotals. That's the way you talk to Gen Zs. You let them do the talking because they want to get away from really a lot of the things that that millennials were about and generations before them were about. You know?
Yeah,
so it's
cool.
really fun to do that as a practice. So.
That's awesome. Well, I appreciate you sharing that context, and I want to transition into our topic today. And, I kind of mentioned it a little bit at the beginning, but, COVID has forced so many of us to take these in-person experiences, which I know universities have a lot of, especially, and translate those into more virtual experiences. Right. And I know, before we jumped on, you and I were talking about that. What are some of the other changes that, what else has changed with your marketing activities that has been caused by COVID? So what, in terms of what your team's focusing on or different things, what have been those biggest changes for you and your team?
Well, of course, the biggest change was that loss of in-person events. And also a lot of that sideline influence of misinformation was a real big factor in the way that we changed things. We got the stay-at-home orders started coming out right around spring break, and so we had students out on spring break, and that was when the faculty were told to take their classes virtual, midterms. So there was a lot of hurry up to do that, and there was a lot of hurry up to stop having in-person meetings, and my team went remote, and so did the student team at the time. So that was kind of the biggest change as far as structurally. The biggest change we did to our communications was I told the student team and the rest of the marketing department here that there was so much misinformation already that we were going to focus on making sure that we were a trusted source. So we were only going to put out like really good information, and even early on, make sure that we were hammering away on being safe, because I really believe that there was a moment where it was either you look down into the future and get hammered for not doing enough, or you get hammered for overreacting. And I chose the overreacting one because that's a win no matter what. You're gonna pick on me all day long for overreacting, and I won't. Not in this case. I mean,
yeah, that makes total sense. Well, so I want to dive into this a little bit deeper then about, these experiences or events. So I know one of the biggest for most universities is commencements, right? And I know that was a big transition for your team after this all came out. You now have the student team you're working with, as well as your full-time team, you're remote. And then all of a sudden you have to, for the first time, plan this all virtual commencement, right? Like, tell me a little bit more about that experience and how you approached that problem from the beginning.
Yeah. Well, on the parent side, like there was a lot of safety concerns, and for the students, there was a lot of like, I don't want to be mean, but there was a lot of denial, right? They really, really wanted to have in-person commencement. And actually there was a group of students who were having a discussion that we weren't privy to right away about, like, well, can we make them delay it? Can we have it in the summer? Can we just have it? But the timelines for planning a commencement are really long. We start right about now, pretty soon. Because you have to order things and set up what's going to happen on the lawn and get the guest speaker and do all of the groundwork before you have this, what is really the biggest event that we have on campus. But in the end, like student government leaders, through that conversation and through conversations with us, they came around, and administration came around, and then they said, well, how can we do this?
Mhm.
And so we looked at some other information that we were getting from vendors, and it really didn't have that kind of interactivity that I wanted to give them, and the kind of interactivity that the students wanted, because there was a lot of talk about, like, we want to be with our friends and our parents and experience this, and
Mhm.
they didn't articulate it, but they want to know that the experience and the interactivity is there.
Mhm.
So I worked with uh, uh, the rest of my team and brought in some other help from IT, of course, and
Mhm.
from another department, and we crafted this archive on the website, and shot a lot of videos for what would usually take place in commencement, and then we wrapped all that around in this live broadcast where we broadcasted to a Zoom room. We expanded our Zoom capability, and we broadcasted to a Zoom room. So then whatever you saw on the screen when people clapped and cheered in the Zoom room, that is preserved inside of the event itself, right? So in the live stream, you could hear this applause, you could hear people talking. So it really was like being there, and you could really see how people got that feedback from interaction, right? Because
Yeah.
social media and media in general these days is all about that, like that feedback, like I am part of this and it's part of me, and it's not just chat.
And it's one of the hardest things to do, with these virtual events. I know a lot of marketers have struggled with that, going from, live events to webinars or in-person things, right? It's hard to get that feedback. So that's really interesting. So I guess to summarize, and I want to hear more, about how this turned out, but to summarize, what I'm hearing you say is, like, there were some concerns, especially from some students, faculty, and staff. And it sounds like a lot of them revolved around, they wanted this in-person experience to be able to kind of celebrate the connection there and to be together. Is that right?
Yeah, they wanted to be together. They wanted to have that togetherness, and I desperately wanted to give it to them, and I really didn't see that in the vendor offerings. Right, we saw a lot of static things that we incorporated, right, by kind of a copying, but we didn't see the interactivity, and we also didn't see, like, a real attention to brand cohesion. So we were able, because we did it in-house and we assembled this team, and we're able to build the graphics the way we wanted and have the announcements the way we wanted. They really were like, it was ours, and we gave it to them. And I haven't heard anything bad. Maybe when the podcast comes out, somebody will have a complaint because I'm saying that it was so fantastic, but it really was. And I think there was proof in the way the event played out.
Yeah.
Because when we got to the end, we had some, 200 people average in the Zoom room, and we had live broadcasted out on Periscope and Twitch and Twitter. I mean, not Twitter, Facebook, and Vimeo and YouTube, right? So across all this, like, wonderful live multimedia broadcast, we had probably like 400 or 500 people, and they stayed all the way, including at the end, where we let the Zoom room run, and we put the Zoom up on the stream, and we had to kick, a couple hundred people out because they just stayed, right? Because I had Anza, the person who helped me with it. They were running the Zoom room, and they were just like clicking the button right through all of these squares. And it was fantastic, because then you see themselves, and they would say hi and all this stuff. And, it's still out there.
Yeah.
Right. So
cool. I love that. I love that story and that example. I mean, that's exactly what you want, right? When you run an event like that, where you just have to kick people off because they just don't want to leave, right?
For anything, right? That's the holy grail of engagement online, that you have to tell them to go away.
Yeah, that's right. So cool. So take me back then. You had these concerns, these students, faculty. You realized that a lot of the vendors that you were looking at just wouldn't help provide the type of community experience that you wanted. So you then decided to kind of work and build a lot of that on your own, leveraging Zoom and some other software platforms to help you do that. But, before that commencement happens, once you had that idea, how did you and your team communicate to alleviate some of the concerns that some of those students and faculty and staff likely still had before they, could catch the vision of what you wanted to do?
Yeah, we really leveraged the social media team.
Hmm.
So Holly and Maya and Callie, they put the message out there, and we just spent a lot of time promoting virtual commencement. And I also listened a lot to the people who were coming in, talking about like what they were concerned about, and why they wanted this commencement experience. Because that I can back up here a little bit. Before all this happened, actually, the commencement committee, which I serve on, had a meeting where I was absent, and said in that meeting, well, let's have Dan do virtual commencement. If we're going to go virtual, let's just have Dan do it. And I said no. I said there's got to be companies out there that are setting this up to do this. And then when I looked, I found out that no, it really wasn't going to meet the concerns that I was already hearing from students. I got an email that said, hey, there's all of the valedictorian candidates are in an email getting ready to try and force some sort of in-person delay. Because they wanted, right, everybody wants that experience of being with their friends and celebrating this like pivotal moment in their life. So
I really like that, because, one of the things I learned from what you're saying there is, I think that one of the most universal things that we learn in marketing is to have empathy for and listen to your clients or your customers, right? In this instance. And, it's clear that you did that because you spent enough time with them and understood, what they wanted and how they were upset. And that led you to not pulling something off the shelf out of the box vendor, which theoretically probably would have been a little bit easier than doing a lot of it on your own. But you did that based on that feedback that you got. So I think that's awesome. I think there's so much that all of us marketers can learn from that, regardless of the type of business.
Yeah, I think so too. And all the way along, the difference between having someone with a great radio voice record the details of each student as the little card flashes across the street is so different than doing what we do in commencement and having the leader of your department introduce the students. And so we did that all the way across the board. And the faculty and administration, honestly, we scheduled them to be on campus on the lawn with our video crew. So really everybody kind of, it seems dramatic to say this, but everybody kind of risked their lives to carry out this commencement instead of doing what you said and pulling it out of the box and having someone record this stuff offline.
Yeah. So. Cool. Well, as you think about this and kind of sum it up, what would you say the biggest wins are that you and your team experienced from this virtual commencement that you did for the first time?
Well, besides serving our constituency the best we could, which I think is really important to any marketer, we were able to represent the school in a really brand consistent way, right? We DIY'd it. We entrepreneurially captured a team and did that. And then we also have this like multi-platform archive of this one-of-a-kind virtual commencement that will live there forever and still gets engagement. We still are getting views out of it, and it represents the school in a really fantastic way as a piece of history. Right. So we have a say in the history of 2020, how you should do things. For me personally, like watching the end and the people's faces in the Zoom room at the end, where everyone was clearly just as happy as they look at commencement when we're taking pictures of them at commencement for later. That was a big win for me, as well as like the team that we built to pull it off, right? Like my marketing manager, Holly, and May and Callie, the leaders of the social media team, and Susan, the webmaster, did a ton of work to get these videos online because everybody has a little video announcing their degree. And Forrest in IT, and I've already talked about ANZA. I think just that team cohesion was great for the department, and yeah, that archive of this experience that lives on the internet. Plus, the way it forced us to look into building live broadcasts, because we do a lot of broadcasting of events now, and we've done a lot of live events. So all of the Bachelor of Fine Arts graduates did their presentations in a live multi-platform streaming format.
Cool.
And that came out of Commencement.
That's awesome. So, one of the things I'm hearing you say too is just the fact of being forced to do this virtually allowed you to have the structure and the content and the recordings and everything else in place to make this truly multi-channel and spread across, other channels longer term, even than, past in-person commencements would have been. Is that right?
Yeah, that's true. And we, to be honest, we had a bit of luck, right? Because over the last 2 years, we've done a lot to upgrade the content production here. And I brought in a couple of professional media teams to start making these videos. And so we had a nice library of material. And of course, we have a beautiful environment to show off here. So we were able to repurpose a lot of that content and connect it again, because it is part of our brand. So.
Yeah. It's awesome. I love it. So as we kind of wrap up this topic today, what advice would you give to other marketers who are in the process of transitioning in-person experiences to more virtual experiences in today's new normal? Not all of our listeners obviously come from university. Some do. Some come from other types of businesses, but many of us, if not all of us, have had this challenge of how do you bring these in-person experiences that we used to do to a virtual environment and still maintain, a lot of that essence of community and connection that those in-person experiences bring. So I guess to kind of sum up what we're talking about today, what advice would you give other marketers out there who are looking to do this?
Well, I had to think about that a lot when I was getting ready for this. And my advice is really just do your best to keep it as simple as possible. I know that sounds funny because this was a really complex undertaking, but keep it as simple as you can, as humanly possible, and then put it out on as many channels as you can, right? Because people are on different channels, because this is part of social media, and media itself is really part of life, and we all have our own preference for channels, right? So if you want to reach people where they're at, you should do that. Yeah. And then the other thing is something that we've touched on here, and I think it's just really important as just a marketing thing. Get as much input from your constituents or your audience as possible, right? Because they are going to tell you what they want to see and what they want to have happen, right? And they're the people that you're serving with taking those events virtual. All that said, keep it simple, but don't skimp on the production value, right? Authenticity is really great, and we really, really strive for that. But when it gets right down to it, if you mess up on your production value, that's going to pull the curtain back, and that's the thing you don't want to do. Yeah. Right? We had a real Wizard of Oz experience by creating Commencement, and we've had the same with the other shows and all that thing. And no matter how authentic the video looks, you don't want to break that. So
quality over quantity, right?
Yeah, quality over, just don't break the fourth wall.
Yeah.
Don't, and then from my point of view, like if you're reaching out to Gen Z pivotals and whatnot, striving to be real, to be authentic, I think is so important, to the point where I am really anti-buzzword, I'm really anti-paradigm and all this jazz, because they are too. And in this case, I agree with that generation. So.
Yeah, I think that's excellent advice. I think it's a great way to kind of sum that up. And to that last point, I think I mentioned this on some previous episodes I've done, but I've done a lot of research into kind of this idea of brand trust, especially in this new normal that we're in with COVID. And, as all of us are trying to build brands, building brand is really about building trust, and trust often comes from being authentic. So especially if your constituents or your audience who you're marketing to as a younger generation, it seems like there's even more emphasis needed there on being real, being authentic, and building trust. And that's really what true brand building is about. It's about being authentic and building trust and being real and helping people understand who you are. So
yeah, proof of copy is more important than ever. So yeah.
Love it. Well, Daniel, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your experience, your story here, and your insights and advice. I think that this has been super helpful for those of us who don't even work in higher education. I think there's a ton that we can take away, from your experience that you shared. So, as we wrap up here today, if there are listeners who want to get in touch with you or have follow-up questions, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, I'm really responsive on LinkedIn. Reach out. Yeah,
Awesome.
Dr. Kelly is my I don't even know what you call it on LinkedIn, but you can find me, Daniel Robert Kelly. You'll find me everywhere.
We'll drop the URL on the page where this podcast lives too, so you can find it there. So, right, Daniel, thanks again so much for your time, and hope you have a great rest of the day.
Yeah, thank you.